Hi, so we're in RStudio now. I'm going to go over some helpful reminders from the day one material. So first thing, you want to set your working directory. So you can check the current location of your working directory using getwd, which stands for working directory, and then set it using setwd. So we decided to set our working directory to this ROTO code folder that we made on day one. Then after you've set the working directory, you can use get working directory again in order to check that it's properly set up. You can also go up here to the top and click Session, Set Working Directory, and then choose the folder directly. If you have any questions along the way, you can also use the help command, so that would be help, and then in parentheses you're going to use quotations, and then whatever the command or function is that you're struggling with. So when we run this, in the bottom panel, you will see under the Help tab, it will give you some additional information about the command that you are trying to run. So let's first get started and install ggplot 2. So I'm going to use this install.packages and I'm going to run it. If you get a pop-up like this, you can just click no. It's basically asking if you want to restart R. So you can see in the bottom console down here that it's running and that it just finished. So now we're going to use the library in order to make sure that the package is actually accessible. So this should be okay, it's just giving us a warning, but if you have a different error message than this, then you can go here to packages, install, and just type in ggplot2. And then you would just click install here. Since I already have it, it's fine, I don't need to do it again. But again, if you get the pop-up window, you just click no. You can install these packages multiple times. It's obviously not necessary, but just so that you guys can see the different ways that you can load and install packages. I also included in the R script that all of you guys will get the dev tools option as well. So let's use the built-in datasets. So we will load that using library datasets. Again, in the video one, I usually highlighted it so you guys could see and then clicked run. You can also just use command return for a Mac, and I believe it's just enter for Windows. So now we have our data set. So let's go ahead and we can just view the data. Let's see. Actually, before we do that, let's go ahead and get some information about the data set that we're going to use in the first part. So we already decided we're going to use this MPG. It's what was listed in the PowerPoint, so you can also follow along with those commands as well. So first, let's just view this data set. So we can see there's quite a lot of information here. We have different information about car types, as well as the miles per gallon it gets on a city versus highway. And so I think it's always a good idea to, really take a look at the data that you're working with, especially if it's, the first time or sample data, and try to, get an idea of what kind of vectors each one of them are. So this would be character, we have some numeric, and yeah, this will be helpful for when we're actually making those scatter and line plots. So now we'll go back over here. We can also just make sure that it is a data frame. So we use class and we see yes, it is a data frame. And then this head command basically just gives you the first couple of rows of data. So you can remind yourself what kind of information you're working with. We can also use column names in order to print out the different variables. So whenever we're calling them in our ggplot, we'll use the correct variable name. So just like we went over in the PowerPoint, there's 3 key steps to making a plot. So we're going to call a ggplot now that we have it installed. We're going to identify the data frame that we're working with, as well as the x and y variable using this aesthetic command. And then we're going to tell RStudio what type of plot we want using this geom underscore and then the plot type we want. So let's go ahead and just start out with a simple scatter plot, and like we did on day one, we're going to color all of the points red. So when we run this, what we see here is basically we have our scatter plot that we wanted. All the points are red, although you can see that there's only 2 different types of years that are in this data set, so probably not the best use of a scatter plot, but in general we can see that this format of the geo or double G plot, just so that you make sure that you don't add a 2 here, and then data equals aesthetic our X and our Y, and then you want to make sure that you're always closing basically everything off properly, so that you'll get, if say I didn't have this right here, basically what would happen is I would get a little X here saying unmatched open bracket, and so it would let me know, I would have to go through and make sure that each one has its own pair so that it's properly closed, and same thing here. So it highlights basically the other end of that bracket for you. It doesn't matter if you put all of this on 1 line or on 2 lines, as long as you have this plus right here, it tells RStudio that you're still working in this same script, in the same command, and so you can press enter or return if you're on a Windows or a Mac, and then just move this on to the next line. We can also save this as a variable like we did on day 1, so let's call it plot, or let's call it PLT 1. Okay, and so now when I run this and then I print PLT1, I'll get the same plot. But this is just, this will be useful in the future whenever you get more customized features going on in your plot and you want to be able to just call, maybe just this basic feature here. So we can also, like we talked about in the PowerPoint, use this aesthetic command in order to apply color to a particular variable. So in this particular example, we're using the same data set. We're mapping the X and the Y to different variables, and then we're going to apply color to each distinct value inside the vector highway. So basically what we see here is that, and you can see it in this legend as well, that because this data type is numeric, meaning it's continuous, we get this continuous gradient of color as opposed to what we saw in the PowerPoint, which is useful to know. And this is because both display and highway, if we go back up here, we can see that display is just numeric data type as well as highway. And so it's not going to classify each one of these points as its own unique variable since it's numeric. But if we change, the x-axis to class, which we do right here, then basically running the same commands as well. So I can do this as well. So this is the only thing that we've changed. Class is a variable that's in our data set. And so now if we run this, what we see is we now get that the same plot that we saw in the PowerPoint, where each unique value in the vector class has its own distinct color. So going with the same kind of map, the same kind of plot, we will go ahead and add legends. So we'll add legends as well as X and Y axis titles. So we're going to use labs again. So remember, as long as we have a plus sign here, we can move everything onto the next line. So when I was originally writing this, I just did enter or return. And then if you are going to be creating multiple titles, then you can just call labs and then inside of the parentheses specify the particular axis that you're wanting to label. So title will label the entire plot. Again, remember to include, because this is going to be a character, quotations. So we will label the main title, we'll label the x-axis as well as the y, and this will label the legend that's shown over here. So now if we compare the two plots, what we can see is that we have our axes labeled. We also have this ROTO plot as our main title, and then we, instead of just having class, which was the variable name, the legend is now labeled car type. which is what we specified over here. You can also move around where the legend is located if you don't like it on the right. So like we did earlier, we're going to, just to minimize space, we're going to save this as a variable, which we're going to call fig. So I'm going to run that. So now I can see up here, I have a variable fig. It's telling me what's listed here as well as the different layers. So now we're going to use theme, and that's going to allow us to adjust where we have this legend. So now we're going to position it at the bottom and then still include the actual geom point plot on top of that. And so when we run it, what we see is it's now moved to the bottom.